All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning in to the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So I'm going to call this podcast, Are You Out for Peace or Are You Out for War? So I'm going to go back to my early 20s. And I remember my friend, we had a meeting once with work, and we used to collect money for bars all over Central Florida. And we used to gamble too. So it was funny, we were all having a discussion, and I think someone stiffed us out of money, and we were aggravated, and we were doing all these things. I mean, this is a long time ago. But I remember very vividly, is that the word? Is it vivid? I don't know, sometimes I screw words up. One of my closest friends saying, instead of peace, and he put up the peace sign, then he cocked up one more finger. He goes, instead of this, you're this. That's what he said. And I looked at him, I said, what are you saying? I didn't even know, like 2 to 3, what are you saying? He's like, no, this is peace. And then when he kicked up the other finger, he goes, that's war. He's like, you love war. And it kind of struck me, and I'm like, I don't like war necessarily, especially when I was younger with the military and all that stuff. I have all the respect in the world for anyone in the military, but I definitely was not somebody who was interested in war, because when I thought of war, I thought about it in that sense. And he's like, no. Whenever something kind of erupts, it almost triggers me, and then I become almost excited. I may become mad, but I all of a sudden go into emotion. Like I start figuring things out, and I start getting very strategic, and I like it. But when there was kind of peace, it was kind of boring for me. I lost focus. I didn't care. I just was kind of nonchalant about everything. It was almost like I always had to have a battle. Or I can't say that I wanted to cause a battle. Maybe I did back then. I didn't realize it. But I don't think I knew how to behave if everything was going right, if that makes sense. But I definitely didn't want to bring drama. But when you're dealing with a bunch of different boners and a bunch of different people betting, and then us gambling all over the United States as well, going to different casinos, gambling boats, and living a crazy lifestyle and all this stuff, there's going to be a lot of chaos, especially when you get involved with partying. You throw all that in there, you're going to have problems. I don't care how it is. I mean, basically, we did everything except drugs. And some of my closest friends even did drugs. So I realized that that day I thought about that, and I still think about that, and I made a decision that I don't want to go to war all the time. But I even realized in my relationship, even with my ex-wife or currently or whatever, sometimes I have to stop myself, because I think I say a lot of things that are triggers or whatever you want to call it, like aggravating people. So I finally stopped doing that, but I sometimes will, it's like an asshole remark. But I think a lot of people don't realize, men and women, that they don't really want peace. They almost need war. And that can go for work, that could go in your personal relationship, that could go on social media, whatever the fuck it is. People don't realize that they're constantly kind of stirring shit. And if you listen to any of my podcasts, I like to call people out on their bullshit. But as much as people say they don't want any drama, they don't want any nonsense, they don't want any of that type of thing in their life, they don't realize a lot of times they're the ones bringing it to them, right? And that's the one thing I had to figure out. And I saw it today, so I was downtown in some city and stuff, and I can just tell, like, just because I was walking by and I seen couples arguing here and there in a restaurant and stuff. Almost a lot of the way we talk to one another, especially if you're in a relationship, let's say, someone's always kind of got to be the asshole. It's almost like you just can't seem to, somebody's always just, it's not fun after a while, or it's just not fun in general. At the beginning, I think when we start relationships, I'm not going to get into a whole relationship thing here now. It seems like we're a lot more cordial, a lot more polite, I think, when we first start dating people. I talk about that in my Mastering Self-Confidence. It's kind of an audition. So it's kind of phony, but we're still we're not doing shit in front of somebody that, you may do down the line, especially in the future, right? You're going to start loosening up and becoming more yourself. And that's one thing I think that happens to a lot of us is the longer you're kind of in a relationship, the more you get exposed for who you really are sometimes, right? And I think that happens with money, and I'm going to do a podcast on that. That I learned in my life is that a lot of times the more money people make, the more they get exposed for who they truly are, because they start to have more money to do whatever they want to do. And you could start to see when they were I don't know if you know this about a lot of people, but if a lot of times when they're broke, they can't do certain things, right? And then all of a sudden they become more and more wealthy, and before you know it, they start doing drugs, alcohol, womanizing, or whatever they're doing. I think a lot of times a lot of money exposes them. And then you can see other people a lot of times that make a lot of money and they become very charitable. They donate their time. They actually help people with their money. And I'm not cutting on either one of them, or especially the ones that, go out and party and do their thing. But money a lot of times exposes people. And I think a lot of times relationships expose people as well. And again, that just doesn't mean boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. I mean even in friendships a lot of times. A lot of times I see dudes with their friends when they go out, and I had friends like this that would start fights, start shit. I even would get nuts sometimes. I was a shit starter. Again, you have to sometimes look at yourself and say, what the fuck am I doing? And do I want peace or do I want war? Every time I think, I was able to travel for so many years and learn so much about myself. And the one thing I started to learn more than anything is about myself, actually, is just being calm and listening to people and kind of understanding where they're coming from and not getting caught up in almost arguing with them a lot of times, or trying to prove others wrong and trying to prove, that I'm always right or any of that type of nonsense. I just wanted to become a person. And I'm not saying I'm a peace, holy roller, religious type peace thing either, where I'm always like, everything should be peaceful. That's insane. But I also just was exhausted from the battle of always battling. And I felt my biggest battle was with myself. I don't think a lot of people think about their biggest enemy at times can be themselves. They don't even realize it because they almost want to self-sabotage themselves, or they need shit to go wrong. And you see this all the time. You see it even publicly with professional athletes, actors, politicians, religious figures. A lot of them really, I think, at the beginning had really great intentions. But as you could tell, as time goes on, I don't know if it's money corrupts them or whatever the case may be, they just find a way to fuck their life up, and others as well. So when it came to me, I just wanted to be like, the last thing I want in my life anymore is chaos. And I know it's fun in the movies because I love making films, and I did, and I love drama. But I used to say I love controlled drama, if that makes sense, because it's fake, it's make-believe. We're kind of all, and that's what makes a movie kind of interesting. If you're not getting some type of drama, then, most likely you're bored. But yeah, that's how I really had to figure out regarding peace and more. And if you can come to peace with yourself, that's one of the biggest damn things you can ever do for yourself. Because again, I think we're always sometimes at war with ourselves, especially when it comes to our beliefs. I think a lot of us get confused, especially religion. I see it more than anywhere. Is we were programmed to, let me grab some water here. We were programmed in a household that pushed religion on us, which I think it was, I'm not saying it's bad, good, whatever the case may be. As you get older, most likely you will make your own decisions on if you want to carry on with that or not. But if you're constantly battling with yourself, that between, in your mind, maybe good and bad. And I had a close friend that was kind of always like that when we were younger. One minute he would do something bad, then the next minute, literally, he wanted to become a priest. Then the next month or whatever, he was doing something bad. Then the next week, he wanted to become a brother. Then the next minute, a preacher. Whatever the case, and then the next minute, he's doing whatever he's doing. But I think that just goes for people now as well, where we're all walking around with a lot of this guilt. So we're again at war with ourselves, because you may think a lot of things you want to do are sinful, right? So you're mad that you want to do these things, or that you are doing these things, because you may want to be seen, another way, or through whatever. You're just battling yourself. And it's not just with religion. It could be even with politics, hypothetically. I think we get scared to make different decisions because we, again, don't want to change I didn't say this earlier, but I did a podcast on it, our identity. So we're almost, if you are, on one side or another politically, or if you want to change religions, or even jobs, a lot of times, you will torment yourself. You will lose tons of sleep. You'll get in arguments. You'll almost, again, self-sabotage yourself, where I know somebody who's very close to me, and I used to say to them, with arguing, talk about war and battling, not wanting peace, every discussion I had with them, they would argue their point. And what I started to test was, it was very interesting. I started to take their side, even though I didn't believe in it most of the times. So they were so used to arguing with me that I jumped on ship and said, yeah, I agree with you. Before you know it, they would flip-flop, I realized in time, and argue the point they originally made. And it was quite interesting. And I used to think, and I think this happens with a lot of relationships we have with people, is they don't necessarily even, at that moment they may feel a certain way, but they almost just want to argue, or they just want to fight again, which is war. I'm not saying physically, I'm saying, just verbally, or just by their behavior. So if you're kind of caught up into this realm yourself, or if you're dealing with other people with this shit, for one, I call them out on it, but two, back to war and peace, I'm telling you, more than anything, come to peace with yourself. And if you're always catching yourself, it could be getting arrested, it could be getting in physical fights, it could be getting in screaming matches, verbal abuse, or just always having problems in your life. You've got to start figuring a way how to get away from that, because the stress, I think, that causes on a lot of people is just unbelievable. Also, I don't think a lot of people realize people don't want to be around that shit anymore. And I may be wrong. You may have a bunch of people that you like to go to war with or battle with. You may have that. Especially when you're younger. I think when younger people are drinking and partying and arguing and they still like fighting, whatever the case may be. But if you're older and your identity is still going to war, I'm not saying, some people are successful at war and that's just their mindset. Now, if you're in the military or any of that type of stuff, I get it. That's a whole different thing. Again, I'm just talking about the average Joe out there that just goes to work or is married and things in that nature. Just please lighten up, dude. I promise you peace. In the long run, you're going to fall in love with it. Especially like audio peace, I call it. I call it actually audio assault, when people are always... I grew up in a loud Italian household. They still are, especially with a lot of women, not to throw them under the bus. Still very loud. And I remember when I first had kids, I was thinking, just like my Italian background, they're going to be screaming and there's all this yelling and all of my aunts, uncles, grandparents, because every house had so many kids. And my kids, I would be like, wow. I wanted to raise my kids in a quieter environment, which I did, but I was kind of like, wow, I can live in peace. And I think that's the same now. And if I get in a car, I don't have to blast music, or I don't have to, it's audio assault, but just living in a peaceful environment. And when you're in a peaceful environment, or you're just thinking in a sense of peace in that war, you have a whole different disposition. And I think what happens with a lot of people is, as they get older, they become a little more peaceful because they have to. They're just shutting down more. Their kids, they had kids and they moved out of the house and they're kind of empty nesters or whatever the case may be. Not always, but if you can start doing that when you're younger, I think, and teaching your kids as well to try to stay away from the drama and the fighting and the arguments. I think my mother wanted me to do that, but I was just still surrounded by a lot of chaos, and I really liked the chaos when I was younger. But I had to come to the conclusion to say, this is actually, I like silence more than I like anything else, because I was an only child. So I would go into these environments where there were literally hundreds of family members screaming in and all over the place. And then I would come home to my mother, and it was so peaceful and tranquil. And then I used to say, oh my God, I got to go home to the board. I'd be home with nothing to do as a kid, and then I'd always go outside and play, whatever. But I would be like, my mother listens to these love songs all day. As I got older, oh yeah, and I was bound to be true. My father's nightclub, which was so loud, he even had a whole apartment set up in the basement. The music's blasting so loud, the bed's vibrating. I really, as I got older, especially in my 30s when I had my kids, I'm like, wow, I really liked a peaceful environment. I just had to create it for myself. And maybe that's something you should think about. Sometimes we don't know how to create a peaceful environment, especially in home or at the workplace or with your friends, colleagues, and family members, because a lot of us were born in a lot of chaotic environments. We also go to a lot of people's homes and it's chaotic. And that's really all I got to say about that. But yeah, peace or war, again, this was just my perspective on it, and it took me a long time to come to peace with myself and not also verbally abuse myself internally, mentally, keep calling myself a loser, keep calling myself all these different types of things, because I would get upset with myself internally because I wasn't as successful as I thought, or I wasn't critically acclaimed, or I wasn't maybe successful in the film industry or an author or whatever the hell I was doing. And then I would kind of take it out on my ex-wife. I may even take it on my kids, my parents at times, friends. I was just acting like a bitch. Again, being at war with myself. And I had to come to grips with myself. I am who I am. I'm trying to do the best I can. And I am by no means perfect, but for the most part, neither is anyone else. All right? So, all right, if you get a chance, you might want to check out my YouTube channel. I usually talk about that at the end of the podcast. I've been putting up a lot of things fitness related, trying to help a lot of people with that. You could go to my richcelenza.com website. I also have my Mastering Self-Confidence program out there. And I just like to help guys if they need help. I try to find the woman or women of their dreams, and I try to do stuff with hygiene, fitness, and fashion. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram like a lot of people. Leave a comment, whatever the case may be. And I said this earlier, I'm going to be learning Zoom, and I'm going to start interviewing people. It's going to get a lot more comedic, hopefully, than this stuff. But hopefully, when I talk this stuff, it helps somebody out there. And please don't beat yourself up, man. That's the one thing I'm going to say to anybody out there. You got one life, live it, and not only don't beat yourself up, don't beat up anybody else verbally or physically, unless you're in martial arts or that's your job or whatever the case may be, because you're just chill out. You know what I mean? Learn to listen, not talk. Learn to conquer. We all like to battle, and we want to, because when I say war, again, I don't mean in the sense where I'm telling people not to go to battle, because I like to battle and go after what I want. What I mean by war is, kind of just always being in the mindset to destroy others or destroy almost your own environment to a certain degree. So maybe that's not the perfect way to word that, but I think you get the point. So, all right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Take care, and if you're traveling, safe travels.